Okay, so now I'm going to finish the Plum Bean book after we've had a chance to discuss. And I wonder if how it ends will change how you view things. So remember, we had Plum Bean change his house. It's crazy. And this is not just a made up example. I mean, there are examples like this all the time everywhere. There was an example right here in Columbus, close to the corner of Morrison High, where there was a house that the gentleman decorated his yard with found art, which all of the neighbors considered to be trash. And there were court battles back and forth for decades because the neighbors saw this as blight, right? He just has trash in his yard and it makes the rest of the neighborhood look bad and drives down our property values and so on and so forth. His claim was, well, it's my property and it's not trash, it's art, right? So he kind of put the courts in this awkward position where they needed to define what art was to define whether his yard was full of art or full of trash, because that matters as far as the law goes. And I wonder about things like noise ordinances, right? That I of course have the right to play music on my property, but there are certain decibel levels that impact everyone else negatively, and that's illegal. But on the other hand, I mean, it's my property. I should be able to play music as loud as I want, right? And if someone else has a problem with it, well, they can put something in their ears or over their ears or whatever. Like, what their response to what happens on my property isn't really my responsibility, is it? Or if I choose to mow my grass or not, why should anybody else care about that? It's my grass, isn't it? And what's great about this particular example with Mr. Plumbean, I like the fact that the neighbors were going to pretend not to notice, because of course there's no way for them to not notice, right? And we usually don't think of visual changes in the same way that we think of auditory stuff or olfactory implications of neighbors and neighborhoods and so forth. And so it's fascinating to do this book with like 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders and talk to them about it, because the class full of kids is like, yay, Mr. Plumbean, he's the best, he's awesome, he's expressing himself, that's great. Meanwhile, the teachers, most of whom are homeowners, are like, oh man, this guy's the worst. This is the type of neighbor you don't want. One's going to do whatever they want and expect everyone else to be okay with it. Right? It's not really a neighborhood, it's not really a community, it's not really a coming together. It's more of an individual right than what about communal responsibility? What about it takes a village and so on and so forth? So you're going to pretend not to notice. Mr. Plumbean's doing his own thing. And so they send the neighbor over to talk to him one-on-one. The man went to see Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talking all night long. All night long, all night, all night. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. Well, my house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, said the man, who had always loved ships. He's just like Plumbean, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle. Then one by one they went to see Mr. Plumbean, late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day the person would set about changing his own house to fit his dreams. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be and it looks like all our dreams." And so the story ends happily. Everyone's expressing themselves through their home, and that's great for this street, but what about the people one street over who are affected by this street as far as property values and so forth? Because the house is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. If no one wants to live one street over from the crazy street, then suddenly that person can't sell their house. They're stuck. I also wonder, if we're talking about responsibilities and so forth versus rights. Some students will say things like, well, the other neighbors should mind their own business. Right? That they don't have the right to tell Mr. Plumbean what he should do with his house. Okay. That they're bad neighbors for trying to tell him what to do. But then I wonder about these late night discussions that Plumbean has with the neighbors. They're talking about their dreams. Shroppy at least supposes that as they're talking about their dreams, Mr. Plumbean gives the suggestion that, well, if you've always dreamed of ships, why don't you turn your house into a ship? And I wonder, are suggestions that different than telling? Right? The neighbors at the beginning are telling him, you need to paint your house, make it like ours. Plumbean, I presume, is suggesting, hey, you could do this to your house also. How different is that really? Just like they want Plumbean to change his house, Plumbean really is encouraging everyone else to change theirs. So if they're bad neighbors at the beginning, then Plumbean suddenly is a bad neighbor now too. Presuming he wasn't a bad neighbor before. Or maybe he's selfish and a bad neighbor all along. Very interesting stuff going on here in this story. Kids' books are way deeper than most people give them credit for. That's why I use them. They're fantastic. Because this does get into do I have responsibilities to my neighbors? Should I cut my grass when they cut theirs? Or am I ethically justified in not doing so? Free will and so on and so forth. Self-care, priorities, or selfishness. My house, my rules. Presuming that they actually own the houses anyway. It very well could be the bank still owns it at this point. And so again, whack job, Shroppy, I know I'm crazy. We took our kids to the closing of this house. Not when the house closed, the closing procedures for when we bought the house. They were very excited. Oh man, we're gonna watch mom and dad sign papers where they buy a house. And I made it very clear to them, whoa, hold on a second. Let's be clear here. We're not actually buying a house. The bank is buying a house on our behalf. For that great privilege, we are agreeing to pay the bank back twice what the place is actually worth. We're not actually buying the house. We're taking out a loan so that the bank can buy it, and we'll pay the loan back. We didn't have that kind of cash to just be like, all right, give me the house, bam. No, that's not how the Shroppies roll. So I just wonder about this Plumbean story. And again, I mean, yes, he has the right to do whatever he wants, within legal limits at least, but again, the law's not the same as ethics. But as Uncle Ben says in Spider-Man, with great power, with great rights, also come great responsibilities. That's why Spider-Man can't walk away, though he's tried. So you got this responsibility thing. I can do something, therefore I should do something. I can care, or I do care, and therefore I can do something to express that. He's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, after all. Neighborhood, community, friendly. He ain't Batman. Batman's not friendly. Batman's really not even a part of the community of Gotham, really. He has businesses there. He's set up, Wayne whatever there, but he doesn't even live there. He's not connected to the community on an emotional level, which is the whole point of Batman. He's not emotionally connected, period. He's psychologically damaged from seeing his parents killed in front of him. So he's closed himself off. Become a detective. Spider-Man's right there with the emotions, man. Which is why he feels guilt and so on and so forth, and remorse, and got J. Jonah Jameson in his ear. Yeah. That's enough for this. Talk to you later.